The history of humanity is often told through the names of emperors, generals, inventors, and conquerors. We remember the men who built empires, the machines that reshaped nations, and the wars that redrew maps. But perhaps the most important moment in our collective existence was not defined by action at all. It was defined by hesitation, by doubt, by a single man who, when everything around him demanded obedience, chose to do absolutely nothing. In the early autumn of 1983, the world was not at peace. It was holding its breath. The Cold War had reached one of its most dangerous phases, no longer a distant ideological rivalry, but a tense and unforgiving standoff fueled by fear, mistrust, and hair-trigger military doctrine. The United States and the Soviet Union stood locked in a cycle of mutual suspicion, each convinced that the other was preparing for a decisive first strike. Diplomatic relations were frozen, communication channels were strained, and both sides had moved from cautious deterrence to constant readiness. Only weeks earlier, Soviet air defenses had shot down Korean Airlines Flight 007 after it strayed into restricted airspace, killing all 269 civilians on board. The incident sent shockwaves through the world and hardened attitudes on both sides. At the same time, the United States had begun deploying Pershing II nuclear missiles in Western Europe, weapons capable of reaching Moscow in under 10 minutes. To Soviet leadership, this was not posturing. It was a direct threat to their survival. This was the atmosphere in which Stanislav Yevgrafovich Petrov lived and worked. A 44-year-old lieutenant colonel in the Soviet Air Defense Forces, Petrov was not a politician, not a general, and not a man accustomed to making decisions of global consequence. He was an engineer by training, a quiet professional who believed in logic, systems, and reason. On the night of September 25, 1983, he arrived at his post inside Serpukhov 15, a secret bunker buried deep in the forest south of Moscow, tasked with monitoring the Soviet Union's most advanced nuclear early warning system. Petrov was not even supposed to be there that night. He had stepped in as a last-minute replacement for a colleague, a routine favor, an insignificant twist of fate. And yet, that small coincidence would place the survival of the entire human race into his hands. Inside the bunker, rows of consoles glowed softly in the darkness. Officers spoke in hushed voices. Screens displayed satellite data from the ecosystem, a network of space-based sensors designed to detect the infrared signature of American missile launches. The technology was considered revolutionary, the pride of Soviet military engineering. Its purpose was simple and terrifying: detect a nuclear attack early enough to allow a retaliatory strike before Soviet missiles were destroyed on the ground. Just after midnight, as September 26th began, the silence shattered. A piercing alarm tore through the command center, a sound so violent and unnatural that it froze everyone in place. Red lights flashed. A giant map illuminated the outline of the United States. On the main screen, a single word appeared in bold Cyrillic letters: launch. The system was reporting that an American Minuteman intercontinental ballistic missile had been fired and was now racing toward Soviet territory. Time collapsed. Petrov felt the air leave his lungs as if the room itself had turned to ice. His training took over, forcing him to suppress panic and focus on procedure. According to doctrine, he had less than 30 minutes before impact. Under the Soviet policy of launch on warning, his duty was clear: immediately notify the highest levels of command so that a massive nuclear retaliation could be authorized. This was how nuclear war was supposed to begin: cold, automatic, and irreversible. But as Petrov stared at the screen, something felt wrong. The computer's confidence indicator climbed rapidly, reaching the highest possible level. The machine was certain. The technology was screaming that the attack was real. Every second of delay reduced the chance of retaliation. Every instinct drilled into him over decades of service told him to pick up the phone. And yet, he hesitated. Minutes later, the alarm sounded again. Then again. Then again. 5 missile launches. The room filled with noise, tension, and raw fear. Officers shouted updates. Phones rang unanswered. The weight of expectation pressed down on Petrov as all eyes turned toward him. One call, one sentence. That was all it would take to set civilization on a path from which it could never return. Petrov's mind raced, not with fear, but with logic. He knew American nuclear doctrine. He understood first strike theory. If the United States were launching a real nuclear attack, it would not send 5 missiles. It would send hundreds, perhaps thousands, in a single, overwhelming blow designed to decapitate Soviet leadership and cripple their ability to respond. 5 missiles made no sense. 5 missiles felt like a mistake, a glitch, a ghost in the machine, but the system was insistent. The clock was ticking, and the consequences of being wrong were unthinkable. Petrov stood at the intersection of absolute technological certainty and fragile human intuition. If he ignored the alert and the missiles were real, he would be responsible for the destruction of his country. If he obeyed the system, and it was wrong, he would ignite a nuclear war that would kill millions within hours and end human civilization as it was known. In that moment, courage did not look like action. It looked like restraint. Petrov made his decision. He picked up the phone and contacted his superiors, reporting that the early warning system was malfunctioning. He had no proof, no radar confirmation, no second source. Only his judgment, only his doubt, only his refusal to believe that the end of the world would begin with 5 missiles and a computer screen. He hung up the phone and waited. The minutes that followed stretched into eternity. The bunker fell into a heavy, suffocating silence, broken only by the ticking of a clock. Petrov stared at his watch, each second echoing like a hammer blow. If the missiles were real, they would strike soon. Moscow would vanish in a blinding flash. He would die knowing that history would remember him as the man who failed. 20 minutes passed. Then 25. The moment of impact came and went. Nothing happened. No explosions. No shockwaves. No end of the world. The silence that followed was deeper than fear. The silence of a planet that had just been spared. Later investigations revealed the truth. The satellites had mistaken sunlight reflecting off high-altitude clouds for missile launches. A rare atmospheric alignment. A flaw no one had predicted. The system had been wrong, and one man had trusted his humanity over his machine. Yet Stanislav Petrov would not be celebrated as a hero. There were no parades, no medals, no public recognition. The Soviet military could not admit that its most advanced system had failed so catastrophically. Instead of praise, Petrov faced interrogation. He was reprimanded for improperly filling out paperwork. His career quietly stalled. The weight of the secret took its toll on his mental health, and he eventually retired into obscurity, living in a small apartment on a modest pension. For decades, the world never knew how close it had come to annihilation. Only after the collapse of the Soviet Union did the story finally emerge. Western historians and journalists uncovered the incident and recognized its significance. In his later years, Petrov received international awards and quiet recognition, but he remained humble, even uncomfortable with the attention. He insisted he was not a hero, just a man who happened to be there. Stanislav Petrov died in 2017. No statues were raised in his honor. No national holidays bear his name. And yet, every sunrise since September 26, 1983, stands as a testament to his decision. His legacy is a warning and a hope. In an age of automated weapons, artificial intelligence, and instant retaliation, the most important safeguard humanity possesses is not technology. It is doubt. It is conscience. It is the courage to say no when the machines are screaming for war.